Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I stood outside my childhood home in suburban Connecticut on Christmas Eve, snow falling around my shoulders, like tiny pieces of my shattered past. The deliberate thrift store coat I wore reeked of mothballs and disappointment, while my scuffed shoes leaked cold water through their worn soles. In my trembling hands, I clutched a crumpled gas station gift bag containing a $5 bottle of wine and a box of stale chocolates. My phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications about my tech empire's latest billion-dollar acquisition, but I silenced it with practiced indifference. Through the frosted window, I observed my family laughing around a perfectly decorated tree my sister Sarah prominently positioned beside her new CEO achievement plaque, like a golden trophy. My mother Patricia spotted my hunched figure through the glass, and her expression immediately transformed from holiday joy to visible disappointment and shame. I drew a shuddering breath, steeling myself for the performance of my lifetime. The front door swung open before I could knock, revealing my father Harold, in his pristine holiday sweater, his face immediately contorting with disgust as he absorbed my pitiful appearance. He stepped backward, as if my poverty might contaminate his polished living room, refusing to extend his hand in greeting. "Edward," he muttered, his voice dripping with the same disdain I remembered from childhood. "You actually showed up looking like that." My mother Patricia materialized beside him, her perfectly styled hair and expensive jewelry, creating a stark contrast to my ragged ensemble. She released a theatrical sigh that seemed to deflate her entire body, shaking her head in practiced disappointment. "This is exactly why I told you not to come," she whispered harshly. "Look at yourself. It's embarrassing to have you here when we're celebrating Sarah's success." I shuffled through the doorway, keeping my shoulders hunched and my eyes downcast, playing the broken man they expected to see. The warm house smelled of pine needles and roasting turkey, but the atmosphere felt arctic as my family members turned to observe my entrance. My sister Sarah emerged from the kitchen radiant in her designer dress and glowing with the confidence of recent promotion. At 28, she had transformed into everything our parents dreamed of, a polished, successful corporate executive who reflected well on the family name. Beside her stood Marcus, her investment banker fiancé, whose expensive suit and golden watch caught the light as he looked me up and down with unconcealed revulsion. "Sarah, darling," Marcus said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "is this the brother you mentioned? The one who never amounted to anything?" Sarah's laughter tinkled like breaking glass as she nodded, wrapping her arm around Marcus's bicep possessively. "I'm afraid so. Edward, meet my fiancé, Marcus. He's a senior partner at Goldstein Bradley and Associates. Marcus, this is my older brother who works at some tiny computer company doing technical support or something equally mundane." Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda emerged from the living room, their whispered conversation dying as they absorbed my appearance. Robert's face twisted with the same family expression of disappointment, while Linda pulled her pearl necklace tighter, as if protecting herself from whatever failure I might spread. "Good Lord, Edward," Robert muttered to Linda, though he spoke loudly enough for me to hear. "He looks worse every time we see him. No wonder Patricia's ashamed to talk about him at the country club." My cousin Jennifer Roberts' 25-year-old daughter laughed openly as she pointed at my threadbare jacket. "Uncle Edward, did you get that coat from a homeless shelter? It's literally falling apart." The only person who tried to defend me was my 80-year-old grandmother Helen, who struggled to rise from her chair in the corner. Her frail voice carried the authority of age as she addressed the room. "That's enough, all of you. Edward is family, and Christmas is about love and forgiveness, not judgment." Patricia immediately cut her off with a sharp gesture, her voice rising with frustration. "Mother, your blindness to Edward's faults isn't helping anyone. Look at him. He's 32 years old and has nothing to show for his life. We can't keep pretending everything is fine. I forced my voice into a stammering whisper, hunching deeper into my pathetic coat. I'm sorry I look so bad. I just wanted to see everyone for Christmas. I brought some gifts. I held up the gas station bag, and the family's collective groan felt like a physical blow. Marcus examined his manicured fingernails with theatrical boredom. Sarah mentioned you work with computers. Tech support right must be thrilling to reset passwords all day. Actually, I mumbled, playing my role perfectly. I do some programming for a small software company. Nothing important, just basic coding work that anyone could do. The room erupted in barely contained laughter. Harold clapped Marcus on the shoulder, sharing a knowing look between successful men. Programming, Harold repeated mockingly. Every unemployed millennial claims they're a programmer these days. It's the new excuse for not having a real job. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with malicious excitement. Speaking of real jobs, I have an announcement that will make this Christmas extra special. She moved to the mantelpiece and retrieved an official-looking document, holding it high for everyone to see. As of January 1st, I'll officially be the Chief Executive Officer of Morrison Digital Solutions, with a starting salary of $300,000 annually. She paused dramatically as the room filled with applause and congratulations. But that's not all. My signing bonus is substantial enough that I'm planning to buy Mom and Dad's dream house as a Christmas gift. Patricia gasped, pressing her hands to her chest as tears of joy filled her eyes. Sarah, darling, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Sarah continued her gaze, finding mine across the room. The house I'm buying costs $800,000, and I can afford it because unlike some people, I actually provide for this family instead of being a burden. The room erupted in celebration as family members rushed to embrace Sarah and examine her promotion documents. I forced a weak smile onto my face while internally calculating that I had earned $800,000 in the last 30 minutes purely from stock appreciation. My empire's latest acquisition had closed during my drive over, adding another $200 million to my net worth, but I stood there pretending to be impressed by my sister's accomplishment. Marcus raised his wine glass high, his voice booming with authority. To Sarah Thompson, who proves that hard work and intelligence lead to success, and to the rest of us, who understand what it means to contribute to society. As the family toasted Sarah's achievement, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, a broken, pathetic figure in secondhand clothes, surrounded by people celebrating everything I secretly surpassed years ago. The irony was so bitter I could taste it, but I maintained my facade, preparing for whatever fresh humiliation awaited me. The dining room arrangement spoke louder than any words could have. Sarah occupied the place of honor at Harold's right hand, her engagement ring catching the chandelier light like a beacon of success. Marcus sat beside her, commanding attention with stories of his latest yacht purchase and vacation home acquisition. I found myself relegated to the children's table in the corner, sharing space with my 12-year-old nephew Tyler, Patricia's grandson, from her deceased son David. Patricia approached, carrying 2 plates. The family received elegant china with gold trim, while I was handed a paper plate decorated with cartoon characters, the kind reserved for outdoor barbecues and children's parties. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. And Jennifer actually photographed my plate with her phone, likely planning to share my humiliation on social media. I thought this would be more appropriate for Edward's current station in life, Patricia announced loudly, ensuring everyone heard her cutting remark. We wouldn't want him to feel uncomfortable using adult dishes. Harold launched into his favorite collection of Edward failure stories, each tale more embellished than the last. He described my college years with creative fiction, mentioning how I wasted opportunities and dropped out of Harvard because I couldn't handle real academic pressure. What he omitted was that I had left Harvard after my sophomore year because my first software company had received a $50 million acquisition offer, and I needed to focus on building my next venture. Even as a child, Edward showed no ambition. Harold continued carving the turkey with theatrical precision. While other kids played sports or joined clubs, Edward sat in his room playing with computers like some kind of antisocial hermit. Sarah joined the storytelling session, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. I remember when Edward was 25 and still living in Mom and Dad's basement, claiming he was working on some revolutionary software project. We all knew it was just an excuse to avoid getting a real job. Marcus leaned forward with interest, his predatory instincts sensing weakness. What happened to this revolutionary project? Did it ever amount to anything? I stared at my paper plate, forcing my voice into a defeated whisper. It didn't work out. I guess I wasn't smart enough to make it successful. I ended up having to take a regular job to pay my bills. The table fell silent for a moment, savoring my apparent confession of failure. What they didn't know was that my failed project had eventually become the foundation of my current empire, growing into a $4 billion conglomerate that employed over 15,000 people across 6 countries. Tyler, who had been quietly observing the conversation, leaned closer to me and whispered, "Uncle Edward, I saw an article online about a tech billionaire who went to Harvard and dropped out to start a company. The guy looked just like you, but older in the picture." I glanced around nervously, ensuring no one else had heard Tyler's observation, then shook my head dismissively. "Just a coincidence, buddy. There are lots of people who look similar." Sarah stood to display her new Cartier watch, a gift from Marcus worth more than most people's cars. She made sure to walk past my section of the table, letting the diamonds catch the light directly in my eyeline. "Marcus surprised me with this beauty yesterday," she announced, extending her wrist for everyone's admiration. "It's from their exclusive collection limited edition. Only 50 were made worldwide." I forced myself to look impressed, widening my eyes with fake wonder. "Wow, Sarah, it's beautiful. It must have cost a fortune." Marcus laughed condescendingly, swirling his wine with practiced sophistication. "When you're successful in life, Edward, you can afford nice things for the people you love. Maybe someday you'll understand that feeling." The gift exchange began with elaborate presentations for each family member. Sarah received diamond earrings from Marcus, a silk scarf from Patricia, and a leather briefcase from Harold for her new executive position. Marcus was presented with cufflinks cologne and a first-edition business book autographed by Warren Buffett. When my turn arrived, Patricia approached with visible reluctance, carrying a small wrapped package, like it contained something distasteful. "Edward, we weren't sure what to get someone in your situation, so we chose something practical." I unwrapped the gift to reveal a self-help book titled "Getting Back on Track: A Loser's Guide to Finding Success After Failure." The room fell silent as I held the book, its bright yellow cover screaming with motivational slogans and promises of transformation. "We thought you might find some useful advice in there," Harold explained with mock sincerity. The author overcame addiction, bankruptcy, and personal failure to build a successful life. Perhaps you'll find inspiration in his journey. Sarah approached with her own contribution, a bright red envelope containing what appeared to be a gift card. "I got you something practical too, Edward. I figured you could use a few good meals." She handed me a $25 McDonald's gift card, her smile dripping with false generosity. "Thank you," I mumbled, clutching the gift card like it was precious treasure. "This is really thoughtful." Tyler watched the entire exchange with growing confusion and anger. When the adults weren't looking, he pulled out his phone and began searching for something, his small fingers typing rapidly across the screen. Marcus received a phone call during dessert, his confident demeanor shifting as he listened to the voice on the other end. His face grew pale, and he excused himself to the hallway for privacy, but his agitated whispers carried back to the dining room. "What do you mean they're backing out?" he hissed into the phone. "That's a $40 million account. We can't afford to lose them, especially not right before the holidays. Sarah followed him to the hallway, her own anxiety rising as Marcus's conversation grew more heated. When they returned, Marcus looked shaken, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature. "Everything all right, dear?" Patricia inquired with motherly concern. Marcus forced a smile, though his hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wine. "Just a minor business hiccup. Nothing I can't handle. One of our major clients had some concerns about our upcoming merger, but I'm sure we can resolve everything after the holidays." Tyler continued his phone research, occasionally glancing at me with growing excitement. I caught his eye and shook my head slightly, hoping to discourage whatever he was discovering, but his enthusiasm only intensified. What Marcus didn't realize was that his minor business hiccup was actually the first domino in a carefully orchestrated campaign I had been planning for months. His firm specialized in predatory lending practices that destroyed family businesses, and I had been systematically convincing their major clients to move their accounts to more ethical institutions. By the end of the month, his company would be facing bankruptcy, though I would let him figure that out on his own timeline. Sarah shot daggers at me across the table, as if my mere presence had somehow caused Marcus's business troubles. "I hope you're not planning to stay too long, Edward. Marcus and I have important matters to discuss after dinner." I nodded submissively, playing my role to perfection. "Of course. I understand you have more important things to do than spend time with someone like me." The rest of the family nodded approvingly at my acknowledgement of my place in the hierarchy, completely unaware that I controlled more wealth than they could comprehend, and that their precious Marcus was about to learn what happened to people who built fortunes by destroying others. As the dinner plates were cleared, Patricia stood up with the theatrical flourish of someone about to deliver a prepared speech. She smoothed her dress and cleared her throat, commanding the attention of the entire room with the authority of a disappointed matriarch. "I think this is the perfect time to address something that's been weighing heavily on Harold's heart and mine." She began, her voice carrying the weight of decades of frustration. "We've been patient, we've been supportive, and we've been hopeful that Edward would eventually find his way in life." I felt the room's energy shift as all eyes turned toward me, trapped at the children's table, like a convicted prisoner awaiting sentencing. Patricia's words carried the rehearsed quality of a speech. She had been practicing each syllable, designed for maximum emotional impact. 32 years old. She continued, her voice rising with each word. 32 years of making excuses, of false starts, of disappointing everyone who ever believed in him. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be asked about your children at social gatherings? When people ask about Sarah, I beam with pride. She's accomplished, educated, successful, and engaged to a wonderful man who appreciates her worth." Sarah preened under the praise reaching for Marcus's hand as validation of her mother's words. "But when people ask about Edward," Patricia's voice cracked with genuine emotion, "I have to look away in shame. I have to make up stories or change the subject because the truth is too embarrassing to share. My eldest son works at some insignificant company doing meaningless work that contributes nothing to society." Harold joined his wife's side, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder, as he added his own perspective to the verbal assault. "We've watched successful families in our neighborhood celebrate their children's achievements," Harold said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Graduations, promotions, marriages, grandchildren, business successes. We attend these celebrations and smile politely while feeling like failures as parents." He turned his gaze directly toward me, his eyes filled with the kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than anger. "Patricia and I have spent countless nights wondering where we went wrong with you, Edward. We provided the same opportunities, the same love, the same support that we gave Sarah. Yet somehow she flourished while you withered into this pathetic version of what a man should be." Uncle Robert nodded gravely from his position near the fireplace, adding his voice to the family intervention. "Harold, Patricia, you can't blame yourselves for Edward's choices. Robert said with the wisdom of an older brother. Some people are born with drive and ambition, while others are content to drift through life accepting mediocrity. It's not your fault that Edward lacks the character necessary for success. Linda joined the conversation, her voice carrying the gossipy tone of someone sharing neighborhood secrets. The ladies at the bridge club have stopped asking about Edward entirely. They know it's a sensitive subject, and frankly, it's become awkward for everyone involved. Jennifer couldn't resist adding her generational perspective, her voice sharp with the judgment of youth. It's honestly embarrassing to tell my friends I have an uncle who's basically a professional failure. Like, what am I supposed to say when they ask what he does for work? That he plays with computers, like a teenager. I sat in stunned silence, absorbing each verbal blow while maintaining my facade of broken acceptance. Tyler watched the proceedings with growing distress, his young mind struggling to understand the cruelty he was witnessing. Harold moved closer to my position at the children's table, his voice dropping to a more personal, intimate level of disappointment. Edward, your mother and I have been discussing our will and estate planning. We've come to the difficult conclusion that leaving you a significant inheritance would be irresponsible. Money requires wisdom and discipline to manage properly, qualities you've never demonstrated. The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. Sarah's eyes lit up with satisfaction while Marcus leaned forward with interest, already calculating potential benefits. We've decided to leave the majority of our estate to Sarah. Patricia continued, her voice steady with conviction. She's proven herself capable of handling responsibility and making intelligent financial decisions. The family business, this house, our investments, everything will go to someone who deserves it. Sarah stood up, her wine glass in hand, her face glowing with triumph and vindication. She looked around the room, gathering dramatic momentum before delivering what she clearly considered the killing blow. I'd like to propose a toast, she announced, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. To family members who contribute meaningfully to society, who make us proud to share their name, who prove every day that hard work and intelligence lead to success. She raised her glass higher, ensuring everyone could see her engagement ring sparkling in the light. And I'd like to propose another toast. She continued, her gaze finding mine across the room. To those family members who serve as valuable examples of what happens when someone lacks ambition, discipline, and the courage to pursue excellence. The room held its collective breath as Sarah forced me to stand up from the children's table, my paper plate and plastic cup creating a stark contrast to the elegant glassware surrounding me. Edward, please stand so we can all drink to your unique contribution to our family's understanding of success and failure. I rose slowly, my legs shaking with what they interpreted as shame and humiliation, but was actually barely contained rage at their collective cruelty. The family raised their glasses in a toast to my failure, their faces showing varying degrees of satisfaction, pity, and disgust. Grandmother Helen struggled to her feet, her voice cracking with age and emotion. This is wrong. All of this is wrong. Edward has always been kind, intelligent, and caring. Success isn't just about money and titles. Patricia quickly moved to silence her mother-in-law, her voice sharp with irritation. Mother, your blindness to Edward's faults isn't helping anyone. Sometimes tough love is the only way to help someone face reality. Marcus received another phone call during the toast, his face growing increasingly pale as he listened to the voice on the other end. He stepped into the hallway again, his whispered conversation growing more frantic. What do you mean 3 more clients are pulling out? He hissed into the phone. This has to be coordinated. Someone is deliberately targeting our firm. Tyler had been conducting his own research throughout the evening, his phone hidden beneath the table, as he pieced together information that was making him increasingly excited and confused. He kept glancing at me with questions in his eyes, but I continued to discourage his investigation with subtle head shakes. As the family finished their toast to my failure, Marcus returned from his phone call, looking genuinely shaken. Sweat had begun to bead on his forehead, and his confident demeanor had been replaced by barely concealed panic. "Sarah, darling, I think we need to discuss some business matters privately," Marcus said, his voice tight with stress. "There are some developments at the firm that require immediate attention." Sarah looked concerned, her perfect evening slightly disrupted by her fiancé's obvious distress. "Can't it wait until after the holidays? This is our celebration." Marcus forced a smile, but his hands continued to tremble slightly. "Of course. I'm sure everything will work out fine. Just some minor adjustments needed in our client portfolio." What Marcus didn't know was that I had spent the last 6 months researching his firm's unethical practices and systematically providing their clients with better alternatives. His company specialized in targeting struggling family businesses with predatory loans, then foreclosing when families couldn't meet impossible payment terms. By the end of Christmas week, he would discover that his firm had lost over 60% of their accounts, effectively destroying the business he had spent years building. Tyler's research had led him to articles about charitable foundations and business acquisitions, pieces of a puzzle that were forming a picture he couldn't quite believe. He looked at me with growing wonder, but I maintained my mask of defeated acceptance, knowing that the evening's true revelations were still to come. Patricia disappeared into the hallway and returned carrying a large leather photo album, her face glowing with maternal pride, as she announced another opportunity to showcase Sarah's achievements. She settled into her chair with ceremonial importance, opening the album to reveal years of carefully curated family memories. "I thought this would be the perfect time to reminisce about all the wonderful milestones we've celebrated as a family," Patricia said, her voice warm with nostalgia, as she began turning pages. The first section displayed Sarah's college graduation photos in elaborate detail. Sarah posed in her cap and gown, surrounded by proud parents, holding her magna cum laude diploma from Northwestern University. Patricia lingered on each photograph, describing the ceremony with loving detail. "Look at this beautiful moment," Patricia said, pointing to a picture of Sarah receiving an academic award. Sarah graduated with highest honors, president of the business club, and job offers from 3 Fortune 500 companies. "We were so proud, we could barely contain ourselves." She turned to the next section, revealing Sarah's first job celebration dinner at an expensive restaurant. Sarah glowed in a professional suit, raising a champagne glass, while Harold and Patricia beamed with parental satisfaction. Sarah's first promotion party, Patricia explained, her voice filled with reverence. 6 months out of college, and she was already being recognized for her exceptional performance. Her supervisor called her a natural leader with unlimited potential. The album continued chronologically through Sarah's career achievements, each milestone documented with professional photography and family gatherings. Sarah's engagement photos covered multiple pages, showing her and Marcus in various romantic poses against scenic backdrops. Tyler noticed what I had already observed throughout the album. There were no photos of me anywhere. Not my Harvard acceptance letter, not my early business awards, not even casual family gatherings where I might have appeared in the background. I had been systematically erased from the family's visual history. "Mom," Tyler asked innocently, "where are Uncle Edward's pictures? Didn't he go to college too?" Patricia's expression tightened with irritation at the disruption of her Sarah showcase. "Edward's college experience wasn't worth documenting, sweetie. He dropped out before accomplishing anything meaningful." Harold joined the photo session, pulling his chair closer to add his own commentary to the family history revision. "We learned early not to waste time celebrating Edward's false starts," he said matter-of-factly. "He had a pattern of beginning things with great enthusiasm, then abandoning them when real work was required." What Harold conveniently omitted was that I had paid my own way through Harvard and had been sending money home during my freshman and sophomore years. Money they had assumed that came from Patricia's part-time job at the library. They had no idea that their mortgage payments during that period had been subsidized by their failure son. Sarah moved to the center of attention, practically glowing as she announced her future plans with dramatic flourish. Since we're discussing achievements and future goals, I have some exciting news to share about the wedding. She produced her phone and began showing photos of an elaborate resort destination, complete with private beaches, luxury accommodations, and scenic mountain views. Marcus and I have booked the Grand View Resort in Colorado for our wedding next September. She announced, scrolling through images of opulent ballrooms and manicured gardens. The venue alone costs $60,000, not including catering, flowers, or transportation for our guests. Uncle Robert whistled appreciatively, clearly impressed by the expense and exclusivity of the choice. $60,000 just for the venue, that's more than most people make in a year. Sarah nodded, proudly pleased by the recognition of her elevated status. We're planning for 200 guests, all carefully selected from our professional and social circles. We want our wedding to reflect our position in society and our commitment to excellence. She paused dramatically, her gaze finding mine across the room with deliberate cruelty. Of course, we're being very selective about the guest list. We can't afford to have anyone there who might embarrass us in front of important people. Our wedding will be a networking opportunity, and first impressions matter tremendously in business. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Everyone understood that I would not be receiving an invitation to my sister's wedding. Marcus nodded approvingly, his confidence returning as he discussed their exclusive social circle. Sarah's absolutely right about the importance of appearances, Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making important social decisions. Our guest list includes senior partners from major firms, politicians, and business leaders who could impact our future careers. We can't risk having anyone there who doesn't reflect our values and aspirations. Harold brought up the family business, a small manufacturing company that had been his pride for over 20 years. The company produced specialized metal components for construction projects, employing about 30 people in the local community. Speaking of future plans, Harold said, settling deeper into his chair, Sarah and I have been discussing the future of Thompson Manufacturing. I've been considering retirement, and Sarah has some interesting ideas about expansion and modernization. Sarah's eyes lit up with ambition as she described her vision for transforming the modest family business into something more profitable and impressive. The current operation is too small scale, Sarah explained, her voice taking on the authoritative tone of a business consultant. We're thinking about selling to a larger corporation that can provide the capital needed for real growth. I've been researching companies that specialize in acquiring family businesses and scaling them up. What they didn't realize was that I could have purchased and modernized their entire operation with the equivalent of pocket change. Thompson Manufacturing was worth approximately $2 million, an amount I earned in passive investment income every 3 days. I could have bought the company, upgraded all their equipment, expanded their facility, and doubled their workforce without making a noticeable dent in my net worth. Marcus launched into his philosophy about business and society, his voice growing louder and more confident as the wine loosened his tongue. The fundamental truth about capitalism is that it requires winners and losers to function properly. Society needs people like Edward to make success meaningful for people like us. He gestured toward me with his wine glass as if I were an exhibit in his personal museum of failure. Without people who accept mediocrity and failure, how would successful individuals understand their own worth? Edward serves a valuable social function by demonstrating the consequences of lacking ambition and discipline. Tyler's phone research was becoming more intensive, and I could see his excitement building as he discovered articles and information that were connecting dots his young mind couldn't quite process. He kept looking at me with growing wonder and confusion, but I continued to discourage his investigation with subtle warnings. A news alert came across everyone's phone, simultaneously interrupting Marcus's philosophical lecture about winners and losers. The notification announced a major technology acquisition happening on Christmas Eve, with an acquiring company valued at over $4 billion. Marcus read the notification aloud, his voice filled with admiration for the business world's elite. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Real businessmen work even on holidays, making deals that change entire industries. This is the kind of success that Edward will never understand. As Marcus spoke about real businessmen working on holidays, my own phone continued buzzing with notifications about the acquisition he was discussing. The acquiring company was actually one of my subsidiary holdings, and the deal had just increased my net worth by several $100 million in real time. Tyler caught me checking my phone and saw the financial notifications flashing across my screen. His eyes widened with realization, but I quickly silenced the device and gave him a warning look to remain quiet. The irony was overwhelming as Marcus continued praising successful businessmen who worked during holidays, completely unaware that he was sitting across from someone whose business empire dwarfed his wildest dreams, someone who was actively orchestrating the destruction of his own company while appearing to be the family's greatest failure. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead found myself drawn toward the kitchen by the sound of my parents' hushed conversation. They stood near the sink, their backs turned toward the doorway, speaking in the conspiratorial whispers of people sharing secrets they assumed no one would overhear. "I have to admit, Harold," Patricia was saying, as she scraped plates with unnecessary force, "inviting Edward tonight was one of our better parenting decisions. Did you see how motivated Sarah looked when she was comparing herself to him?" Harold chuckled quietly, drying a wine glass with methodical precision. "That was exactly what we hoped would happen." Sarah needed to see concrete evidence of what failure looks like, especially now that she's entering the executive level of business. Watching Edward fumble around in those pathetic clothes reminded her why she works so hard. Patricia nodded enthusiastically, her voice dropping to an even lower whisper. And Marcus was clearly impressed by Sarah's family values. He could see how we don't enable failure or make excuses for laziness. That kind of strength will serve Sarah well in her marriage. The casual cruelty of their words hit me like a physical blow. They had deliberately planned my humiliation as a teaching tool for my sister, a motivational object lesson designed to inspire her continued success. I wasn't invited as family, but as a cautionary tale. Harold's voice carried satisfaction as he continued the conversation. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Sarah's new position, her engagement, the holidays, it all came together to create the ideal scenario for Edward to understand his place in this family. I backed away from the kitchen and moved toward the hallway, where I could hear Sarah's voice coming from the guest bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see her pacing while speaking in low, urgent tones to someone on the phone. "Marcus is absolutely perfect for this family," she was saying, her voice filled with excitement. "He understands success and has no patience for people who make excuses for their failures. Having Edward here tonight showed Marcus exactly what I come from, people who don't tolerate mediocrity." She paused, apparently listening to whoever was on the other end of the call. "Oh, you should have seen Edward's face when I announced my salary and promotion. He looked so pathetic and defeated. It was actually satisfying to watch him realize how far behind he's fallen. Marcus and I were discussing it earlier. He said Edward's presence actually made him appreciate me more because he could see the contrast between success and failure in the same family." My sister was using my supposed failure as a romantic bonding experience, with her fiancé turning my humiliation into courtship material. Sarah's voice grew more animated as she continued. "Marcus and I agreed that Edward will serve as a perfect cautionary tale for our future children. We'll be able to point to Uncle Edward as an example of what happens when someone doesn't apply themselves or pursue excellence. It's like having a live demonstration of failure right in the family." I moved away from the bedroom and encountered Uncle Robert and Harold in the study, where they were examining documents spread across the desk. Harold looked up as I approached his expression, shifting from conversation to business. "Edward, actually, since you're here, there's something Robert and I need to discuss with you," Harold said, his voice taking on the formal tone he used for serious matters. Robert gestured toward the papers on the desk, which appeared to be legal documents and financial statements. "Your father and I have been working with a development firm that's interested in purchasing Thompson Manufacturing. The offer is substantial enough to provide comfortable retirements for both of us." Harold nodded, his expression showing relief at the prospect of financial security. "The development company plans to modernize the operation, which unfortunately means most of the current employees will be replaced with automated systems. But Robert and I agreed that business is business." My stomach turned as I realized they were planning to sell the family business to a company that would destroy the livelihoods of 30 families who had worked loyally for years. The development firm was notorious for gutting small manufacturers and selling their assets for profit. "We're planning to finalize the sale right after New Year's," Robert continued, "but we wanted to keep it quiet until after the holidays. No sense in ruining Christmas for the workers who'll be losing their jobs." Harold smiled with satisfaction, pleased with their business acumen. "The proceeds will fund Sarah's wedding, provide her with a substantial down payment for her first house, and give Patricia and me the comfortable retirement we've earned after years of building the business." They had no idea that I could have purchased Thompson Manufacturing, upgraded their entire operation, expanded their workforce, and provided better benefits than they had ever imagined. Instead, they were selling out loyal employees to fund luxury purchases and celebrations. Marcus appeared in the doorway of the study, his confidence somewhat restored after his earlier business calls, though stress lines still creased his forehead. "Harold, Robert, I couldn't help but overhear your business discussion. My firm handles acquisitions and mergers for development companies. I'd be happy to review your documents and ensure you're getting optimal terms." Robert welcomed Marcus into the conversation, grateful for his expertise. "That would be wonderful. We want to ensure this transaction benefits everyone involved, at least everyone who matters to the family's future." Marcus examined the documents with professional interest, his voice taking on the authoritative tone of someone dispensing expert advice. "This looks like a solid deal. Development firms know how to maximize efficiency and eliminate unnecessary overhead. The current workforce was probably overpaid anyway. These companies specialize in streamlining operations." Harold nodded approvingly, impressed by Marcus's business perspective. "Exactly what we thought. Sentiment has no place in business decisions. We can't let emotional attachments to employees prevent us from securing our family's financial future." As they discussed the destruction of 30 families' livelihoods with casual indifference, Marcus received another phone call. His expression immediately shifted from confidence to barely concealed panic as he listened to the voice on the other end. "What do you mean our credit line has been frozen?" he whispered harshly into the phone, stepping away from Harold and Robert. "That's impossible. We've never missed a payment and our assets are substantial." He disappeared into the hallway, his voice growing more frantic as the conversation continued. "You can't close our accounts without explanation. We have major transactions pending that depend on that credit line." Tyler had been conducting his own investigation throughout the evening, and his research was leading him to conclusions that were making him increasingly agitated. He approached me near the study, his phone clutched in his small hands, his eyes wide with excitement and confusion. "Uncle Edward," he whispered urgently, "I found articles about a tech company that donated $50 million to children's hospitals this Christmas. The CEO's name isn't mentioned, but the company description sounds exactly like what you said you do." He showed me his phone screen, which displayed a news article about charitable foundations and corporate giving. My heart raced as I realized Tyler was piecing together connections that could expose my entire facade. "That's just a coincidence, buddy," I said gently, trying to discourage his investigation. There are lots of tech companies that donate to charity. But Tyler's young mind was sharp, and he had already made connections that adults would have dismissed as impossible. The article says the CEO graduated from Harvard, but left to start his company just like what Grandma said about you. And look at this picture. He showed me a blurry photograph from a business conference where I'd been photographed from a distance while speaking at a charitable foundation event. The image was unclear, but Tyler could see similarities that others might miss. Tyler, I said quietly, I need you to keep whatever you're thinking to yourself tonight, okay? Sometimes things are more complicated than they appear. Tyler nodded solemnly, but his excitement was clearly building. He understood that he had stumbled onto something significant, even if he couldn't fully comprehend the magnitude of what he had discovered. Marcus returned from his phone call, looking genuinely shaken, sweat now beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature. His confident demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled panic. Sarah, he called out, his voice tight with stress. We need to discuss some urgent business matters. There have been some unexpected developments at the firm. Sarah appeared from the bedroom, her own anxiety rising as she absorbed Marcus's obvious distress. What kind of developments? You said everything was under control? Marcus forced a smile that fooled no one, his hands visibly trembling as he reached for his wine glass. Just some minor adjustments needed in our client portfolio. Nothing that can't be resolved with proper management and strategic planning. What Marcus didn't know was that his minor adjustments represented the systematic destruction of his company, a process I had been orchestrating for months as justice for their predatory business practices. By New Year's Eve, his firm would be facing bankruptcy, his personal assets would be frozen, and his engagement to Sarah would be tested by financial pressure he had never experienced. The evening's cruelest revelation was yet to come, but Tyler's investigation was creating a foundation for truth that would soon shatter everyone's carefully constructed assumptions about success, failure, and the real distribution of power in our family. Patricia called everyone into the living room with the theatrical authority of a director preparing the final scene of a play. She positioned herself at the center of attention, her voice carrying the weight of someone about to deliver a definitive judgment. But before Edward leaves us tonight, I think we should have what I call Edward's moment. Patricia announced, her voice dripping with false sincerity. This is an opportunity for him to acknowledge his failures and commit to making better choices in the coming year. She gestured for me to stand in the center of the room, creating a circle of family members around me like judges, preparing to deliver a verdict. The living room lights seemed brighter, more harsh, as I took my position and waited for whatever fresh humiliation they had planned. Edward Mai. Patricia began pulling out a handwritten list from her purse. I prepared a comprehensive summary of the ways you've disappointed this family over the years. I want you to acknowledge each failure publicly so we can all move forward with honesty and clarity. She cleared her throat and began reading from her list with the solemnity of someone presenting evidence in court. First, you dropped out of Harvard University, wasting the education that your father and I sacrificed to provide. Please acknowledge this failure and apologize to the family. I hung my head in apparent shame, forcing my voice into a broken whisper. I'm sorry for wasting the opportunity to finish college. I know it disappointed everyone and reflected poorly on the family. The room nodded approvingly as Patricia continued down her list. Second, you're 32 years old and have never held a meaningful job that contributes to society. Please acknowledge this failure and apologize. I swallowed hard, maintaining my facade of defeated acceptance. I'm sorry for not achieving career success like Sarah. I know my lack of accomplishment has embarrassed the family. Patricia's voice grew stronger as she continued through her prepared indictment. Third, you have no savings, no property, no investments, and no evidence of financial responsibility. Please acknowledge this failure. I'm sorry for being financially irresponsible. I mumbled the words, tasting like poison as they left my mouth. I know successful people build wealth and security for their families. Sarah stepped forward with a manila folder, her face glowing with the satisfaction of someone about to deliver a master stroke of humiliation. She opened the folder to reveal what appeared to be a job application, complete with multiple pages of forms and questionnaires. "Edward, I've taken the liberty of securing you an interview opportunity," Sarah announced with dramatic flourish. "I spoke with the manager at Target, and they're willing to consider you for a part-time position in their electronics department." She handed me the application with ceremonial importance, ensuring everyone could see the retail store's logo and minimum wage salary range printed at the top of the form. "I thought this would be perfect for you since you claim to know about computers," Sarah continued, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Retail work will teach you about responsibility, customer service, and showing up on time. Basic skills that you'll need before you can hope for anything better." Uncle Robert chuckled, approvingly pleased with Sarah's practical approach to solving the Edward problem. "That's excellent thinking, Sarah. Edward needs to start at the bottom and work his way up like everyone else." Patricia produced a pen and demanded that I fill out the application, immediately turning my job search into entertainment for the family gathering. They gathered around me as I sat at the coffee table, pretending to struggle with basic questions about work history and references. Marcus made several phone calls to his business associates, putting them on speakerphone, so the entire room could hear his conversations. His voice carried the authority of someone conducting important networking business. "David, you have to meet Sarah's brother, Edward," Marcus announced into his phone. "He's a perfect example of what happens when someone lacks the drive and intelligence necessary for success in modern society." The voice on the other end laughed, apparently amused by Marcus's description. "Sounds like evolutionary failure in action. Natural selection works, even in business." Marcus continued his phone parade, calling various colleagues and friends to share my humiliation as entertainment. Each call followed the same pattern, introducing me as an example of failure, describing my pathetic appearance and lack of accomplishment, then inviting people to draw their own conclusions about genetics and social Darwinism. Patricia disappeared upstairs and returned with a cardboard box containing clothes from my teenage years. She dumped the contents onto the living room floor, revealing outdated t-shirts, worn jeans, and a high school Letterman jacket that had seen better days. "I found these in the attic," Patricia announced with vindictive satisfaction. "I thought it would be fun to see if Edward can still fit into his clothes from when he had potential." She held up a t-shirt with a faded rock band logo, examining it like evidence in a criminal trial. "This is from when Edward was 17 and actually showed some promise, before he gave up on everything that mattered. The family insisted I try on various items while they photographed my attempts to squeeze into clothes that were obviously too small." Patricia took several pictures with her phone, claiming she wanted to document the family Christmas while ensuring my humiliation was captured for posterity. Harold produced a whiteboard from his home office and set up what he called Edward's Business Education Workshop. He wrote basic economic terms on the board and began quizzing me with questions designed to make me appear ignorant in front of Marcus. "Edward House." Harold began with the tone of a disappointed teacher. "Can you explain the difference between revenue and profit?" I pretended to struggle with the concept, giving deliberately wrong answers that made Marcus shake his head with disgust. Aren't they the same thing, money coming into a business?" Harold sighed dramatically, turning to address the room rather than me. "This is exactly why Edward can't hold a real job. He lacks basic understanding of fundamental business concepts that any successful person learns by age 25. Marcus joined the impromptu education session, clearly enjoying his role as the successful businessman teaching the family failure. "Edward, what's your understanding of investment portfolios and asset diversification?" I stared blankly at him, playing the role of someone completely bewildered by financial terminology. "I don't really understand investments. Isn't that just for rich people, Arish?" The room erupted in laughter as Marcus explained basic investment concepts with the condescending tone of someone speaking to a child. What he didn't realize was that my investment portfolio was worth more than his entire firm, and that I had been actively destroying his business while sitting in their living room. Tyler's research had reached a breakthrough point, and his excitement was becoming impossible to contain. He approached me with his phone, his young face flushed with the thrill of discovery. "Uncle Edward," Tyler whispered urgently, "I found a picture of you receiving some kind of business award. The article says you donated millions of dollars to charity, but it doesn't mention your company's name." I glanced around nervously, ensuring no one else had heard Tyler's whispered revelation, then shook my head dismissively. "Tyler, you're getting confused. Those articles aren't about me." But Tyler's conviction was growing stronger, and he had found connections that were becoming impossible to dismiss. "The man in the picture has the same scar on his hand that you have from when you cut yourself building that tree house. And look at his smile. It's exactly like yours when you're happy." Patricia noticed Tyler's intense, whispered conversation and interrupted with sharp irritation. "Tyler, stop bothering your uncle with whatever nonsense you're looking at on that phone. We're trying to help Edward face reality, not encourage his delusions." Patricia brought out the charity jar from earlier in the evening, counting my contribution of 15 crumpled dollar bills in front of the entire room. She held each bill up to the light, as if checking for counterfeit currency, her voice dripping with theatrical disappointment. $15. Patricia announced to the room, letting the pathetic sum sink into everyone's consciousness. Edward's total contribution to charity this year. $15 from someone who claims to care about helping others. She compared my contribution to Sarah's $1,000 donation, which Sarah had written as a check with dramatic flourish earlier in the evening. The contrast was designed to highlight the vast difference between success and failure, between someone who contributed to society and someone who took from it. Sarah's single donation represents more generosity than Edward has shown in years. Patricia continued, her voice building to a crescendo of disappointment. "This is the difference between someone who creates value and someone who consumes it." A knock at the front door interrupted the charity jar ceremony, causing everyone to turn toward the sound with curiosity and annoyance. Patricia moved toward the door, with visible irritation, clearly upset by the interruption of Edward's moment of truth. Through the frosted glass, I could see the silhouette of a professional courier dressed in a uniform and carrying what appeared to be legal documents. My heart began racing as I realized that my carefully planned evening was about to take a dramatic turn. Edward Thompson. The courier called through the door, his voice carrying the authority of someone conducting official business. "I have urgent legal documents that require your signature." The family immediately assumed the worst, their faces lighting up with malicious satisfaction as they concluded that my legal troubles had finally caught up with me. Patricia opened the door with the expression of someone welcoming the final proof of my failure. "Is this about debt collection?" Patricia asked the courier hopefully. "We've been expecting Edward to face legal consequences for his irresponsible lifestyle." I approached the door with apparent reluctance, playing the role of someone terrified of whatever legal trouble had found me. The courier handed me a thick envelope marked "confidential" and time-sensitive, requiring my signature on multiple documents. As I signed the papers, I glimpsed the contents acquisition documents for Marcus's firm transfer papers for Thompson Manufacturing and legal authorizations that would change everyone's life within the next 24 hours. But I kept my expression neutral, acting like someone confused and frightened by official paperwork. The family watched with anticipation as I finished signing, clearly hoping for drama and revelation that would provide the perfect ending to my evening of humiliation. They had no idea that the documents I had just signed would give me complete control over their financial futures, their business interests, and their carefully constructed social positions. Tyler continued his investigation throughout the courier's visit, his young mind making connections that the adults couldn't see. He had found articles about business acquisitions, charitable foundations, and corporate leadership that were painting a picture he could barely believe. Marcus received yet another phone call, his face growing increasingly pale as he listened to whatever devastating news was being delivered. His confident demeanor had completely disappeared, replaced by the expression of someone watching their world collapse in real time. "What do you mean our business license has been suspended?" Marcus whispered harshly into the phone, stepping away from the family gathering. "On Christmas Eve, that's impossible." As Marcus's conversation grew more frantic, I quietly pocketed the legal documents, knowing that tomorrow would bring revelations that would shatter every assumption my family had made about success, failure, and the real distribution of power among the Thompson children. My phone rang with a tone I had never used before, a specific ringtone reserved for my executive assistant, when matters required immediate attention, regardless of time or circumstances. The sound cut through the living room's tension like a knife, causing everyone to turn toward me with curiosity and annoyance. I initially declined the call, maintaining my facade of someone whose phone only rang with telemarketers and spam, but the phone immediately rang again with increased urgency. Patricia gestured impatiently for me to answer it and get the interruption over with. "Hello?" I said quietly, keeping my voice in the same defeated whisper I had maintained all evening. "Mr. Thompson," came the crisp professional voice of my assistant, Jennifer Walsh. "I apologize for calling on Christmas Eve, but we have a situation that requires your immediate authorization. The Beijing acquisition is ahead of schedule, and the board needs your approval for the $4.2 billion transfer." The room fell silent as everyone heard the words "billion-dollar transfer" coming from my phone. I looked around nervously, realizing that my carefully maintained cover was beginning to crack. "Jennifer," I said, my voice automatically shifting into the authoritative tone I used for business matters, "can this wait until tomorrow? I'm with family right now." "Sir, with respect, when you're authorizing transactions that exceed $4 billion, the international markets don't recognize American holidays. The Shanghai Exchange is already open, and every hour we delay costs approximately $12 million in market fluctuation." I glanced around the room, seeing confusion and disbelief growing on my family's faces as they processed the conversation they were overhearing. Tyler moved closer to me, his excitement reaching a breaking point as his research was finally being validated. "Uncle Edward," Tyler said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I've been researching all evening, and I found articles about a tech billionaire who looks exactly like you. The articles say he went to Harvard, dropped out to start a company, and now runs a $4 billion empire." The room exploded into nervous laughter as the adults dismissed Tyler's claims as childish fantasy. But Tyler was not deterred by their skepticism. He approached me with his phone, showing the screen to anyone who would look. "Look at this picture," Tyler insisted, holding up a news article with a photograph from a business conference. "This is Uncle Edward receiving an award for donating $50 million to children's hospitals. He's wearing a suit instead of those old clothes, but it's definitely him." Sarah laughed condescendingly, shaking her head at Tyler's obvious confusion. "Tyler, sweetie, that's impossible. Edward works at some tiny computer company doing basic technical support. He's not a billionaire." But Tyler had done his research thoroughly, and his young mind had made connections that adults would have dismissed as impossible. The article says his company revolutionized data encryption, and that he owns 15 subsidiary companies across 6 countries. Marcus, still reeling from his own business disasters, looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and growing concern. "Edward, tell this kid that he's gotten confused by some internet articles. You're not a billionaire hiding in plain sight." My phone rang again, and this time I made the decision that would change everything. Instead of declining the call, I answered it with my real voice, the voice I used when commanding boardrooms and making decisions that affected thousands of employees. "Jennifer, I'll handle the Beijing acquisition immediately." I said, my tone carrying the authority that had made me one of the youngest billionaires in America. Also, I need you to execute the Marcus Sterling termination. Goldstein, Bradley, and Associates is now under our complete control, and I want Sterling removed from all positions effective immediately. Marcus's face went white as he heard his name mentioned in connection with business termination. What did you just say about my company? I looked directly at Marcus for the first time all evening, my posture straightening as I shed the defeated demeanor I had maintained throughout the dinner. I said that as of 20 minutes ago, I own your company, and as of right now, you're fired. The room fell into stunned silence as I continued my phone conversation, making business decisions that involved more money than my family could comprehend. Jennifer, also execute the Thompson Manufacturing acquisition. I want all current employees retained with improved benefits packages, and I want the development company's predatory contract voided immediately. Harold's mouth fell open as he realized I was discussing his business, the company he had planned to sell to fund Sarah's wedding. Edward, what are you talking about? How do you know about our business deal? I ended my phone call and turned to face my family, my voice carrying the confidence of someone who controlled more wealth than they had ever imagined. I know about your business deal, Harold, because I've been monitoring predatory development companies for months. Thompson Manufacturing is now under the protection of my company, which means your 30 employees will keep their jobs and receive better benefits than you ever provided them. Tyler jumped up and down with excitement, his research finally vindicated. I knew it. I knew Uncle Edward was the billionaire from the articles. Nobody believed me, but I was right. Patricia's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and slowly dawning horror as she began to process the implications of what she was hearing. Edward, this is impossible. You can't be serious. You work at some small computer company. I smiled for the first time all evening, the expression transforming my face from defeated acceptance to quiet confidence. I do work at a small computer company, Patricia. I own it. I also own 14 other companies, including the one that just acquired Marcus's firm. Sarah stepped forward, her face flushed with anger and disbelief. This is ridiculous. If you were rich, we would know. You can't hide billions of dollars. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone to show them my banking app. It's remarkably easy to hide wealth when people are determined to see only what confirms their existing beliefs. You've spent years assuming I was a failure, so you interpreted everything through that lens. I showed them my phone screen displaying account balances that contained more zeros than they had ever seen in one place. Sarah grabbed the phone, staring at the numbers with growing shock and rage. "This has to be fake," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction as she examined the legitimate banking application. People can't just hide this kind of money. Marcus, whose world had been crumbling throughout the evening, finally understood the full scope of what had happened to him. You destroyed my company. You systematically took our clients, froze our credit lines, and orchestrated our bankruptcy. I nodded calmly, my voice carrying the satisfaction of justice finally served. I spent 6 months researching your business practices, Marcus. Your firm specialized in predatory lending that destroyed family businesses and left people homeless while you got rich. I provided your clients with better alternatives, and they made the intelligent choice to leave you. Harold struggled to understand the new reality, his mind reeling as he tried to reconcile the son he thought he knew with the billionaire standing in his living room. Edward, if this is true, why didn't you tell us? Why let us believe you were a failure? I looked around the room at the faces of people who had spent the evening humiliating someone they believed was powerless and broken. I wanted to see who you really were, Harold. I wanted to understand how this family treats people they consider beneath them. Tyler approached me with hero worship in his eyes, his young mind thrilled by the revelation that his kind uncle was actually a powerful business leader. Uncle Edward, does this mean you're going to help everyone now? Are you going to fix everything? I knelt down to Tyler's level, placing my hand on his shoulder with genuine affection. Tyler, you were the only person in this room who showed me kindness tonight. You defended me when others mocked me, and you saw through my disguise because you looked with your heart instead of your prejudices. Patricia began crying her tears, mixing shame with desperate hope for forgiveness. Edward, I'm so sorry. We didn't know. If we had known you were successful, we never would have treated you like that. I stood up, my expression hardening as I addressed her conditional remorse. That's exactly the problem, Patricia. Your apology is based on my wealth, not on the recognition that cruelty is wrong, regardless of someone's financial status. You should have treated me with respect because I'm your son, not because I'm rich. Sarah's anger was building as she realized the full implications of my revelation. You let us humiliate ourselves. You sat there and listened to us mock you when you could have stopped it at any time. I could have stopped it. I agreed, my voice calm but firm. But then I never would have learned that my sister wanted to use me as a cautionary tale for her future children, or that my parents invited me here specifically to motivate your continued success by showing you what failure looks like. The room fell silent as my words sank in. They had revealed their true natures throughout the evening, and now they had to face the consequences of their choices. Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda began backing toward the door, clearly uncomfortable with the dramatic shift in family dynamics. We should probably head home, Robert mumbled, avoiding eye contact as they made their escape from the awkward situation. Jennifer tried to lighten the mood with nervous laughter, but her attempts fell flat in the heavy atmosphere of revealed truth and consequences. I pulled out the legal documents I had signed earlier, holding them up for everyone to see. These papers represent several important changes that take effect tomorrow morning. First, Thompson Manufacturing is now a subsidiary of my company, which means Harold's employees keep their jobs with improved benefits. Harold's relief was visible, though overshadowed by shame at his willingness to sell out loyal workers for personal profit. Second, I continued, Marcus's firm is bankrupt as of tomorrow, but I'm offering Sarah a position as a junior associate in one of my companies. She can prove herself through merit instead of relying on family connections or inherited wealth. Sarah's face showed a mixture of humiliation and desperate calculation as she weighed her options in light of Marcus's financial destruction. Third, I'm establishing a $10 million education fund for Tyler, because he's the only person in this room who demonstrated character and kindness tonight. Tyler's eyes widened with wonder, not fully understanding the magnitude of what had just been given to him, but recognizing that his loyalty had been rewarded beyond his wildest dreams. I moved toward the door, my business complete and my family's true nature fully revealed. I'm leaving now to spend Christmas with people who value character over wealth, kindness over status, and humanity over social position. Patricia reached out desperately, her voice breaking with emotion. Edward, please don't leave like this. We can fix this. We can be a real family now that we understand. I paused at the door, my hand on the handle as I delivered my final message to the people who had raised me. Patricia, you can't fix years of conditional love with a few minutes of regret. Real family doesn't require wealth to inspire respect and kindness. Tyler ran to me, hugging my leg with fierce affection. Uncle Edward, can I come with you? I want to spend Christmas with someone who's nice to people. I looked at Tyler's parents, who nodded their permission, understanding that their son had chosen the side of kindness and truth. Of course, Tyler. I think you'll enjoy meeting some people who value character over appearance. As I prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with a message from my assistant confirming that the Thompson Manufacturing employees had been informed about their job security and benefit improvements. 30 families would wake up tomorrow morning with better prospects because I had chosen justice over revenge. Marcus slumped in his chair, the full weight of his destroyed empire finally sinking in. His engagement to Sarah was now tested by financial pressure instead of supported by mutual success, and his predatory business practices had finally caught up with him. Sarah stood in the center of the room, her perfect evening transformed into a lesson about the difference between earned success and inherited privilege. She would have to prove herself in my company without the advantages of family name or special treatment. Harold and Patricia faced the realization that their conditional love had cost them their relationship with their most successful child, and that their grandson had chosen to leave with the family member they had spent years dismissing. I walked out into the snowy Christmas Eve night carrying Tyler toward my car, where my driver waited with warm blankets and hot chocolate for the ride to my company's employee Christmas celebration. Behind us, the house that had been filled with cruelty and judgment sat quietly in the falling snow, its occupants left to contemplate the true meaning of success, family, and character. Tyler looked up at me as we settled into the luxury car, his young voice filled with wisdom beyond his years. "Uncle Edward, why were they so mean to you when you're so successful?" I smiled at him, finally able to drop the last remnants of my evening's disguise. "Because, Tyler, some people measure success by what you have instead of who you are. Tonight taught me that real wealth isn't about money. It's about having people in your life who value kindness, honesty, and compassion." As we drove toward a Christmas celebration filled with people who had chosen me as family, based on shared values, rather than blood relations, I reflected on the evening's lessons. My biological family had revealed their true characters when they believed they held all the power, but Tyler had shown that age and cynicism don't have to corrupt the human capacity for loyalty and love. The snow continued falling as we left the suburban neighborhood behind, heading toward a future where success would be measured by the positive impact we made on others' lives, not by the cruelty we could inflict on those we perceived as powerless. What lessons have you learned about how people treat others when they think no one important is watching? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this story if it resonated with your own experiences with family dynamics and hidden success. Subscribe for more stories about justice, redemption, and the power of character over circumstance. Please share this story with someone who needs a reminder that true worth isn't determined by what others think of us, but by how we treat others when we believe we hold all the power. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may your holidays be filled with the kind of genuine love and respect that money can't buy.